You remember the sound of a rotary phone, but you also remember the exact moment you downloaded your first app. You're the last generation to have a childhood that exists only in your memory, and the first to have an adulthood that is permanently archived on the internet. If you were born between 1976 and 1985, you've spent your life being told you're either a cynical Gen Xer or a lazy millennial. But the truth is, neither label fits. You are a Xennial. You belong to a psychological microgeneration that exists in a glitch in human history. You aren't just a mix of two groups, you are the bridge between the analog past and the hyper-digital future. But why does this specific window of birth years matter so much in 2026? It's because the timing of your birth created a brain that is digitally bilingual in a way that may never happen again. Today, we're going to look at the unique psychology of the Xennial and why your ability to remember the before is actually your greatest superpower in a world that can't seem to put its phone down. The analog sanctuary. Think back to your childhood. It was a world of analog independence. If you wanted to see your friends, you rode your bike to their house and looked for their shoes at the front door. If they weren't there, you just figured it out. There was no GPS, no instant messaging, and no way for your parents to track your every move. Psychologically, this created something called cognitive autonomy. Xennials learned to solve problems without an algorithm. You had to sit with boredom, and that boredom was the fuel for your creativity. Because you didn't have a screen to distract you every 5 seconds, your brain developed a high tolerance for frustration and a deep capacity for deep work. You learned how to be alone with your thoughts, a skill that is becoming increasingly rare in the modern age. But then, just as you were entering your formative years, the period where your prefrontal cortex was finishing its most critical wiring, the world flipped the switch. Most generations are either digital immigrants or digital natives. Gen X had to learn technology as adults. Gen Z was born with a tablet in their hands. But Xennials are the only group that lived through the transition while their brains were still in a high plasticity window. Researchers have found that because you were young enough to adapt, but old enough to remember the manual way of doing things, you developed a unique technological bilingualism. You can troubleshoot a complex software issue without breaking a sweat, but you also don't feel a panic attack coming on if you leave your phone in the car for an hour. You have the ability to unplug because you know what the world looks like without the internet. You remember what it's like to have a conversation that isn't recorded, a mistake that isn't photographed, and a past that isn't searchable. This leads to a fundamentally different relationship with privacy. Your 7th grade haircut and your awkward high school breakups exist only in dusty photo albums or in the stories you tell. This ghost past gives you a psychological freedom that younger generations will never truly understand. You aren't haunted by your younger self. You're allowed to evolve. However, it's not all nostalgia. The Xennial psychology was also forged in fire, specifically the financial fire of 2008. While older Gen Xers were already established in their careers and younger millennials were still in school, Xennials were the frontline casualties of the Great Recession. You were the ones trying to buy your first homes or establish your first real career paths right as the floor fell out. This created a psychological trait called economic hypervigilance. Even if you were successful now, many Xennials carry a quiet underlying anxiety about stability. You've seen how quickly secure systems can collapse. This makes you more resilient and better at pivoting than almost any other group, but it also means you're constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. You are the masters of the side hustle and the plan B, not because you want to be, but because your early adulthood taught you that you had to be. Today, Xennials find themselves in a strange position. You are the managers who understand why the Gen Z employees are burnt out. But you also understand why the boomer bosses are frustrated by the lack of traditional work ethics. You are the translators. You deal with a paradox. You have the skepticism of Gen X, but the optimism of the early internet era. You remember when the internet was a tool for connection, not a weapon for polarization. Because of this, you're often the most balanced voices in the room. You can see what was gained by the digital revolution, the connection, the information, the speed, but you also know exactly what we sacrificed to get there. You know that we lost a certain kind of presence, a certain kind of patience, and a certain kind of peace. So why is this micro generation so important right now? In a world that is increasingly overwhelmed by AI, algorithms, and 24/7 documentation, the Xennial perspective is a stabilizing force. You are the only ones who can bridge the gap. You have the grit of the analog world and the agility of the digital one. If you remember the smell of a freshly printed ditto sheet and you're watching this on a device that would have seemed like science fiction to your 10-year-old self, you're a Xennial. And your ability to hold on to your humanity while navigating the machine is exactly what the world needs right now. Don't let the labels define you. You aren't a leftover, you're the blueprint. If this resonated with you, drop a comment below and tell me, what's the one thing from the before times that you wish the younger generations could experience just once? Hit that subscribe button to keep exploring the psychology behind what makes us human. And if you want to support the person behind these psychological videos, buy me a coffee. Link will be in description and pinned comment.